It is time to engage! Guys, it's been a while, but it is Star Trek season again, and we've got like 33 episodes of various types of Trek coming this year. It's bonkers.
Yeah.
So today, I'm excited to be joined by Vanya and Powys. Powys, this is your first time on the couch. Welcome.
Yes, thank you.
We're a very, easy-going group, but if you get your Star Trek facts wrong, someone on YouTube will probably kill you.
Nice.
So the stakes are high. Now, on the topic of stakes being high, this is the return of the most beloved captain of our generation. And so, if this got screwed up, Star Trek Picard, Episode 1, Remembrance, would be like, there'd be riots in the streets. So, let's just start with like the general feeling. Vanya, what was your feeling by the time this episode started and by the time this episode ended? How'd you feel?
So I felt, at first I was anxious about it, because you just, anytime there's something new in Star Trek, you want it to go right, because you love it so much. And then when they were playing poker, I was like, that's a really familiar feeling. That's nice, especially him and Data. And they were funny, and it was neat. And then there was that switch for me where I was like, oh, this feels really good when he says, I don't want the game to be over.
That's right.
And I was like, I don't want it to be over either. Right. You know what I mean? I want it to be, I want this kind of to be like a backdoor pilot to like a reboot of TNG and everybody just comes back. That would be like ideal. But obviously it's not going to happen. But I was still really happy with the episode at the end, I think. Like I felt like, oh, it has legs. Like at the end I felt like, okay, we could be going somewhere, I think the people that were working on it love Star Trek. That's the way, like the beginning, I was nervous and then it kind of was good for me.
Nice. Powys, what were your feelings? Did you have a similar ride or?
Well, at first going in, we had texted each other and I was like, Jesus, it's going to be a 5.5 out of 10. I'm like, oh, I just know it's going to let me down. But I was really surprised, pleasantly surprised. And from Blue Skies with the Bing Crosby song immediately, I'm like, that goes back to Data singing at Deanna and Riker's wedding. And then there's the shots of space and the Enterprise D. You notice they didn't use the E actually at the beginning. Enterprise D. I'm like, this is going to work. This is going to work.
Because it's what we're nostalgic for and what Picard is nostalgic for.
Right. And just by maybe the first 5, 6, 7 minutes, I'm like, this is going to work. They've got the right pacing. They got the right tone. Picard has set up at Chateau Picard, where his brother Robert and his son Rene were
dying tragically.
I know. And you're like, maybe he's got a chance at this sort of normal life that he always sort of regretted not having, And I loved it. I loved the episode, and by the end of it, it did leave you with. Can we actually speak about the actual end? Or
guys, we're gonna go spoilers. So if you haven't watched this yet, definitely go watch Star Trek Picard.
That's right.
Pause it.
That's right.
Yeah.
But by the end, with the Borg cube, you're like, what the hell is going on here? And so I loved it. There were all sorts of mysteries, and there was all sorts of ways to go with the character. And Picard, I love the fact they acknowledged his age. I love the fact that when he was running with, is it Daj? Is that Daj? He's like, yeah, I gotta catch my breath.
Yeah.
Like, that's not the captain from like 1992.
But that's an 80-year-old man.
It's an 80-year-old man.
As he can.
It gave Picard vulnerabilities. Like, we know that he has vulnerabilities because, we've seen him go through heavy things where he had to recover and that it made an impact on his life. But that kind of vulnerability is like very just straight up human. People know that. People are familiar with that.
Yeah.
The other stuff that he recovers from is kind of superhuman, but him not being able to get up a flight of stairs is like really realistic,
Yeah, that vulnerability was pretty nice. Personally, when it started with the Enterprise D and there was nary a change in sight, everything about that ship looked like it should, I was like, okay, this terror I have of seeing the Enterprise NCC 1701 show up with all kinds of bullshit changes on it.
Right.
I was like, okay, this is... So, let me get this straight. 60s bad, 80s good. Okay, 80s good is what the new Star Trek line is going to be. So, we're not changing anything there, which was nice. It really made me want to see Guinan. And the fact that Whoopi Goldberg was like the day before invited to reprise her role as Guinan made me feel like, okay, good. She belongs in a flashback like this. She belongs with Picard. And it's nice to hear that that's moving forward. And I had a similar feeling where as the show went on, I felt like there are moments that I felt like a Trekkie needed to do a pass on this script.
Sure.
Like, there were moments where Picard said, Starfleet! And I think he meant to say the Federation? Because, like, Starfleet's literally your army.
Yeah.
The Federation is who decides that we're going to do this governing choice governing choice. So there were Trekkie moments where I was like, somebody... Yeah. Michael Chabon seems to really care about this, but there's something in this script that's like not quite there. I felt like there were a couple of lazy choices in the exposition. 20 years have passed. We need to let you know what occurred. A TV interview with a package you see before it felt like it broke the form.
I actually like that though.
Yeah.
I actually like that because you could do the exposition in a nice sort of organic way, and we can actually see how we can see Picard's reaction to it. Whereas the exposition at the end, where they're talking about Data and the positron thing, I was like, all right, that's too much. And Maddox, I'm like,
bringing Maddox back was cool.
It was cool.
I hope that. I don't even know if that actor's still alive.
Oh,
he hasn't done anything in 15 years. But hopefully that actor is alive and is part of this story.
Well, I'll tell you, I did watch Measure of a Man right after I watched Picard. And it's an excellent episode. It's beautiful. It comes up a lot, actually, over the time that we've been talking.
It does.
On this show, we talk about that episode a lot. It's like a real crux of of TNG. But you bringing up Guinan, there's one of the best conversations with Guinan and Picard in 10 Forward. And so when I was watching Measure of a Man, I was like, oh yeah, they were in 10 Forward. It's so cool. It's like a nice connection. And then I feel like the Bruce Maddox thing was kind of, I thought it was cool too, and I actually want them to go deeper with that, connect it. When I watched Measure of a Man, I was like, I want them to talk deeper because he has so much information on Data because of all the times when Data would send him all his, Data's Day and all that, his information about himself. So he can go really, really deep there.
Yeah, and I mean, if anybody built those synths,
it makes a lot of sense.
And actually, at the end of Measure of a Man, he was sort of less prickish. Maddox. He's like, hey, hopefully you can.
Yeah, it was kind of like in a play where everybody's like, if you on the same side, it's like a Footloose and they're fighting, but then they're like, we're buddies at the end.
We'll bow together.
Totally. In plays, how they do that because they only have a couple hours. But
I feel like by the end of this episode, my dickish nitpicking aside, I felt like they had built a modern mystery box in the way that, I'm not a huge fan of Kurtzman and what he's done with Star Trek, but if there's one thing he and J.J. Abrams have in their DNA, it's that mystery box thing. And, Kurtzman's never landed the plane, ever, as far as I can think. But this is something where he was responsible at the beginning for parts of this. Chabon took over. Chabon's not back for season 2 because, to be fair, show running is not just being the head writer. It's being the person most in charge of writing, but it's also a management role.
Right.
And if you're not cut out for management, or you don't like managing directors as well as writers, and then liaising with networks, you might just not like to show run. It's a hard job. And so this idea that whatever they do in this season may not be so connected to the next season, I'm hoping that this season it sort of opens the mystery box, shows us what's inside it, and yet gives us a reason to want another season. Because the idea here is to do 3 years of this show.
Yeah.
I mean, A, Patrick Stewart is not a young man. B, having an end in sight means a theater actor who has already been in the Star Trek box might be able to say, yeah, you know what? I'll give you 3 years of my life. especially if I'm in charge of how this goes down. And he's an exec producer on this.
Yeah, I feel like they have an opportunity here to make it really tight, like a tight 3 seasons, you know, and not fuck it up too much. You know what I mean? If they know what their end game is.
Well, it was like the one season of Watchmen, which was spectacular, by the way.
Yeah.
And it's like
Another JJ acolyte doing a very good job with one season of television.
Yeah. But I feel like if they really, the director seems like she's really on board too. Like I saw her speak. She's a Star Trek fan. She's a TNG fan mainly. That's her Star Trek. She was saying, and I think what's her name?
Well,
Annalie Culpepper.
Should we address the fact that she's a black woman?
She's the first black woman in Star Trek history
directing a premiere of
yeah.
Picard. I mean, she's got a great track record. I've seen some of her credits. She's done a lot of cool shows.
Yeah.
I forget some of the other credits, but it's like Flash. She's on episodes of Flash and some other stuff.
She seems cool. I wonder. I don't know if she's going to direct more episodes, but.
Yeah, I don't know. She's got the first block of 2, I think, and then they block it off in 2s because Frakes is directing a block of 2 episodes as well.
Are there like little mini arcs in there?
I don't know. I mean, I assume with the entire thing having this single mystery that it's just the way to block shoot. It's easy for directors to prep 2 episodes. You hire 5 directors. There's your season.
Right.
So that's my guess from a logistic standpoint. I don't imagine that this is 5 mini arcs, just because they're dealing with some big stuff.
Yeah.
And on the topic of big stuff, let's talk about, for any Dune fans out there, Star Trek's Butlerian Jihad, where we've decided now that synthetic life forms, we should never have them again. What do you think about this? I mean, everything from B4 to the destruction of an entire race of synthetics, it seems. What are your thoughts on where they've taken Star Trek, and androids, synthetic life, and
I feel like it's not realistic, but in the same way, when I was watching Measure of Man, I was like, oh, that's very dangerous, the idea of, like, making people. You know, and if you don't make any, then you can't have any issues with what happens after you've made them. So in some ways I'm like, well, yeah, you're avoiding that, but then it's not like they don't already exist. You know, we got a Blade Runner situation happening here. You know what I mean? Blade Runners are bursting into people's, Romulan Blade Runners are bursting into people's homes and killing people, innocent bystanders and that sort of thing. So, it would be one thing if they didn't already exist, and probably can get to a point where they can make themselves anyway.
Well, it's
kind
tricky
of procreate themselves.
You've got the private sector where Nguyen Sung decides to make a few, it turns out, androids. And, there's, looking at the entire retcon storyline now, there's B4, then there's Lore, then there's Data, then there's a few others if you go into books, and then Data goes ahead and makes Lol. Yeah. And so, you have sort of a self-replicating, you have the gray mass
because
terror
humans
where
have made
AI
them.
creates AI.
Well, because humans have made them, and we have it in ourselves to, it's like we turn on the switch. By making them, we turn on the switch of, you want to survive. So in order to survive, you want more of yourself. That's what we do for ourselves. And they learn that, and then they want to do the same thing. So I don't know if it's realistic.
Well, and it seems like they didn't succeed at it.
It is sort of the same idea with the... the whole Blade Runner thing was really about slavery, right?
Yep.
You create a whole race of people just to do stuff you don't want to do.
Which was Maddox's whole plan.
Yeah.
To build...
Yes.
Yeah.
Right? So I like the idea. I mean, I think maybe if that race of people got out of control, I say loosely, I think you might shut it down. Or there would be a body that would shut it down out of fear. Or the citizens would, we can't have these people. They're too smart for us. Or they're
dangerous. They're frightening.
They're strength in numbers. How strong are they? Can they beat us up? Can they take our stuff?
Yeah, and if we connect it to Discovery, now that is that if we look at the
AI,
history of control, now we're talking it's not like we haven't been messed with before.
But yeah, and if Section 31 is oh guys, too many robots. We have this thing back from way back in the Klingon war days. that we just wrote 2 years ago. But this idea of a long-standing concern about AI. It would be interesting to see if they do approach Maddox or spend more time in the Daystrom Institute, and especially with this character who I think is going to wind up on more of this storyline. If we start talking about the knowledge of control, that would be sort of fun. And then it would start to piss off people who are TNG fans who like Picard and don't like Discovery. If they start to thread each other together, then people's loyalties will be called into question.
It is kind of interesting that they've gone in the same sort of like robotic questioning of robots and their sentience and that sort of thing in this. After we just came off of season that was all about like control and that issue within Starfleet.
Yeah.
You know, and now we're having this like another, you know, Starfleet issue.
And this is a real Roddenberry story.
Well, actually,
because have you guys seen Questor from the 70s?
No.
It's a pilot that I believe it was NBC did with Gene Roddenberry called the Questor tapes. And I have a weird amount of knowledge on this because I was asked to pitch a story to Michael Pillar's son.
Oh, okay.
Who wanted me to write a reboot for Questor, which I basically pitched what Picard is with this like daughter of the Questor tapes is basically about a very advanced alien robot, basically, that then you can tell Roddenberry plants those seeds and builds data later to play with those ideas. But this AI question, robots replicating themselves, it's a huge Roddenberry story. And so it's very exciting to get to see how they're moving this story forward. And I'm wondering what you guys think they're going to do with the relationship between Romulans and synthetic life forms. Is there a grudge here? Why did the synthetics decide to destroy the fleet yards that we're building the way the Romulans get saved? That appears to be the way these two stories click. There's the synthetics that had this attack and then needed to be destroyed, and then there were the Romulans that needed to be evacuated. And these two stories overlap.
They collide, and it's interesting because those Blade Runner basically like they're Romulans, right? Because they say speak English when they're like, and then when their helmets are taken off, they're Romulans,
and when they're spitting Romulan.
And so I'm kind of like, okay,
or
that's
whatever that
something
was,
happening.
some sort of a
Like acid spit.
I don't know. That was
cyanide thing.
That was crazy. And then, but I also watched The Defector on TNG, and now you have this like a line where you can connect Picard to like sympathies to Romulans all the way back to like season 3, I think of TNG. So we're kind of like, okay, he already has those sympathies that lie with, you know, Romulans.
And he and Spock and Spock's father Sarek,
like
there are all of these moments where there's sympathy for this idea of bringing Romulans into the fold instead of keeping them as this just evil adversary.
So
I think the danger could be eventually that you might run out of enemies.
There's no shortage
if you become
Dominions.
If you become friends with
Borgs.
the Klingons and friends with the Romulans, and
you know that
eventually you're going to be who else is left?
The friendship with Klingons
The Borgs.
is always rocky. You'll never have like a solid foundation.
The
of
Borgs,
friendship
you'll
with
have the
Klingons.
Borgs over for dinner.
I like Klingons.
We've got a couple
like,
of them in this series.
Klingon relationship with the Federation, it's always going to be tepid, right? Like, you're always going to be like,
And the fascinating thing about this is that Gene Roddenberry had this vision for the United Federation of Planets, where all of these people who are different manage to build not so much a democracy, but a federation where they all have alignments with each other. And so the idea of bringing these other world powers into one umbrella is the most Star Trek idea.
Yeah, but that's why, that's what I agree with that so much, because that's why Picard would make that choice to want to save the Romulans.
And there have been some fascinating parallels.
Picard would. But you touched on a point about Gene Roddenberry. Do you think that this is something he would approve of? I mean,
so far. So far, I'd say it goes after the interests he has. It remains to be seen by the end if it has the ideologies he has. And, at the end of this episode, when we trek it or wreck it, we'll see who thinks what about that. But the thing that I find interesting is the parallel to Star Trek 6, where you have Praxis, the Klingon moon is destroyed. There's 50 years to evacuate the Klingons from their homeworld. Let them die, is what our captain says. Right. And here we are a generation later, well, really like several generations at this point, but the same Federation has decided, ooh, we don't want to help an enemy. If they're going to die, let them die. And it's fascinating to see how, I've seen some people bitching online about how it's so strange and unbelievable for the Federation to make this choice to save the Klingons and then this choice to let the Romulans die. And to that I say, there was a time when the United States of America went to the rescue of people in internment camps. And now they put people in internment camps. Right. So generations make a big difference in how the government is run. And, the next generation can make a whole new choice.
That's totally valid.
Yeah, because within, you have in the United States, we're talking, you have the Japanese internment. Put them there.
Yep.
Then reverse that. Now we're back at it. So it does make a lot of sense. Except I think that people would feel like, oh, but Star Trek is ideological and that, that doesn't happen. But we know that it does because we've seen,
Yeah, there are always factions within Starfleet and the Federation where you've got someone trying to take over Starfleet or someone trying to take over the Federation. And this idea that, the Federation was terrified of the changelings and then they went too far. And the Federation was terrified of the Klingons. They were terrified of AI. They were terrified of all these things and sometimes they go too far. Is a fascinating meditation on government and what we as members of democracies allow our governments to do. Out of fear of the Romulans, out of fear of the changelings. There are so many great reasons to be afraid. And Star Trek has always been about overcoming that fear. Our main characters have often, not always with Captain Kirk, but have often been the ones to remind the people in power of what the moral thing to do is.
True.
Right. Even if it means going against.
Very true.
The rules necessarily.
Yeah. And it's this idea that a nation that will sacrifice privacy for security will have and deserves neither. Is an old Greek idea.
It's very interesting. Not to talk about measurement, I know I've talked about it many times now, but there are a lot of really good instances, and one of them is that he spanks, Picard kind of, spanks Philippa, the judge, at the beginning, and he's because she was a protest kind of judge, and she made decisions to leave Starfleet because she was, because she wasn't getting her way, basically, and he's oh, you're stubborn, and then now we're watching him. He did the same thing. He protests, left, just left. Yeah. And she's oh yeah, they let me back in. And he's oh, you just wanted your own way, you want. And I'm well, dude.
Well,
I wonder if you remember her in that moment.
Let's talk about this idea that now we know why Picard stepped away from Starfleet and the Federation. And what do you think, Vanya? Do you think this is in his character? Do you like this choice in his character?
Well, one thing that I just want to say with that interview, it was very Magnolia, Tom Cruise being ambushed, and I was come on, guys, really? You didn't know that was going to happen? She doesn't two questions.
She's right there.
Jumped in.
But I do think it's realistic to the character because we know that the character, it's not realistic to Picard, the beginning of TNG.
Yeah.
It's realistic to
That's right.
the end Picard. Because we know that he's changed. You know, he's the man who goes in and plays poker with everybody now.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And he connects to everybody in that way. So there's a sensitivity, and an empathy that is much larger. That well of it that he has is bigger. So it actually does make a lot of sense that he would stand up for the Romulans in that way.
Wouldn't you say that age also plays a factor in?
Yeah.
You get to a certain point and you just don't give a shit anymore. It's like a younger captain may be like,
Actually,
play
I think
by
the
the rules.
reverse happened to him.
Mm-hmm.
He got older and he gained more. Like, he actually cares more.
Sorry. I mean, less adherence to the rules. It's like, okay, the Federation is not doing what I think they should do. I don't need this anymore. I
feel like he was definitely
farm,
he definitely was a rule follower to
Totally.
a certain extent. But when you talk about Philippa and like the Stargazer and what he had done there, he was it was odd because he's kind of breaking the rules there, But he was also irritated with her for being like a protester,
right.
And so he's always had those two parts to him.
And it's almost like as time has gone on, he's replaced his letter of the law with caring more about the spirit of the law.
Yes.
I mean, I guess
good.
Star Trek Insurrection is an interesting choice because he's being affected by the fountain of youth, but he also is an older man when we see him finally take the pips off and say, that's it, I'm throwing in my commission to do what's right.
Yeah.
And so that's the second last story we saw him in. And that's who he was when we left him.
Yeah, and it's funny. I also watched Data Lore.
Yeah.
And he's really rigid.
Yep.
Picard's quite rigid in that because everything that's done is protocol.
Mm-hmm.
Even Tasha's like, do you trust Data now? And he says he does. He trusts him. That's actually a great point in Data Lore that connects with this episode because he says he trusts him completely.
And there was never a time when he
didn't. Measurement, he says that again about Data, and now he's said it again in this. So it's like they've really definitely watched those episodes, I think. And then he says, well, but I just wanted everybody to know on the bridge that it was really good for Tasha to ask that question because she's just being a good security officer. Like, he's so rigid. It's like, he's like, she's just being good. She's just playing by the rules. And I'm like, yeah, we know. Like, you don't have to tell us, but he was that rigid. Season 1. Now we're looking at.
Speaking of Data Lore, by the way, just a slight aside, I saw that about 2 months ago again. And at the very end, Data uses a contraction.
Yes.
When he says, "I'm fine."
It's such a mistake.
I'm like, what the hell?
Yeah. It's like
But was
one
that
of
a
the
misdirect?
classic errors. No, it's been known as like a classic error in Star Trek continuity that he should not have used that contraction in that moment.
Especially, unless they did it on purpose.
They might have done it on purpose
But-
as a misdirect. Oh my God, is it lore?
Has it been lore the whole time?
You're like,
blow up Data?
But,
They weren't thinking that hard.
and he's also like, kind of, Picard is also like, at the end of that episode, he says to Data, "Oh, get in a uniform and doctor going," but he's not like nice to anybody. Now he's like so nice.
Yeah, he's become such a softie in his old age. It's nice.
Yeah. He's just like, do that. She's like really hurt. He's like, get to the sick bay.
Yeah.
And he's like, put on a damn uniform. Get out of that, whatever that is.
Yeah.
And I was just like, oh man.
He's unpleasant.
He's our most beloved.
How'd that happen? Yeah.
Go back to season 1, guys.
Yeah.
He's rough. He's rough
He's a bit
around
of a dink. Yeah, I gotta say, there's a certain element.
Well, he was
to-
dickish in that episode.
Yeah.
With the whole "shut up, Wesley." Like, it's like, come on,
constantly.
what are you doing?
He's obvious. Wesley's always right. That's the thing of this "shut up, Wesley" joke that happens
I just don't
constantly.
buy that.
Wesley is always right.
I think that's died a bit because Will Wheaton has asked for that to kind of die because I think it was really upsetting him.
Well, yeah.
And so I think that kind of has some of the fandom is
finally
that.
turned up. Well, and any of the fandom who decides to go back and watch those episodes will realize everybody else should shut up and listen to Wesley. Yeah. So that's the show we were actually watching today.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about this retcon of B4 being so unlike Data. We can kind of get away with it, I guess, but there are 20 years of comics and apocryphal information now that goes into how when you put the emotion chip into B4, all of a sudden Data's memory engrams manage to reassert themselves, and there's all kinds of stories that for 20 years have been Data comes back to life through B4.
Right.
This is retconning all of that. Nothing that anyone ever saw on screen. just comics mostly, and books, how did it make you feel to have Data really and truly killed by this episode?
I feel like maybe it was a bold move. I kind of understand it. I feel like they didn't want anything hanging on, like, okay, we're just gonna, like, because if you could have Data back, you would just do it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if it was really easy, you would do it, like, no problem, because who wouldn't want that?
Although the moral quandary of all synth life forms have been outlawed
That's right.
would be that if you could, but you can't,
Right.
is really difficult.
But if you put, like, a difficulty measurement on it, like they did, well, basically by saying, okay, he's gone, then we can't be waiting for it. You know what I mean? So I kind of understand why they made that decision. We can't be like, well, just do every time something happens, we can just do the Data thing.
Yeah.
Just get him,
just
get him back.
Reset button.
Yeah.
It was all a dream.
Yeah, they're like actually saying we're going to commit to this, and I think that's okay.
Makes sense. Now,
I still want Data back. So.
yeah.
Everybody wants.
Although when you see how the visual effects make puffy Brent Spiner not quite puffy Data.
Was that visual effects or was that makeup?
Oh, that was visual effects. You should see the pictures of him on set.
Yeah.
Ooh. Yeah, that's visual effects.
Because it looked like
My
caked
whole
on
thing-
makeup.
Oh, it's
What's
that too.
going on?
It's
My
both,
whole thing
yeah.
was just the hairline, and like, how could he have a hairline that's farther back
Well,
before and now?
It
it's
only
further-
works
further
because
forward.
it's a bald man's memory. He doesn't remember how hair
yeah.
works.
Is that what it is?
You don't remember how hair works, right?
I do not.
See?
It's been
It's just
years.
like, maybe hair comes out of here. I don't know. But yeah, I feel like if it was anything but a memory, it would not work as well as it does.
True.
I remember seeing the visual effects, and they've altered the hairline a bit since the early ads.
Yeah.
And it's better than it was, and it's honestly better than I expected. But yeah, having Data back only in memories is the only way this kind of works.
That's also the tricky question. Is like an android doesn't age, so how are you going to get away with that?
Well, Data started aging, right? Like he kind of made himself.
Well, he decided to
Did
have
he?
that shock of
Yeah.
gray in all
Future
good
thing.
things.
Yeah, I mean, you can make an argument that he just wants to make himself look aged.
But can he? Can an android actually do
He
that?
can grow hair. He
Yeah.
can grow a beard. Like
Yeah.
if he wanted to do those things, like obviously he has to be able to because he very much is aging. When you watch
That's
him
right.
in Insurrection or Nemesis, and then go back to season 1, like you're gonna have to come up with a reason for why this is happening.
Because he's like, I just want to be aged with my friends.
Yeah. And when you see the like anti-time future in All Good Things, he does deliberately put that shock of gray in his hair
That's right.
in order to age along with his pals. So, there's the idea that he's trying to do it. So I can buy it because I want to.
Then he's gonna. I mean, biologically, can he physically make himself flabby? Can he get a double chin?
I think he can do whatever he wants.
Can he do?
Yeah.
But as an android, like I'm just wondering what the limitations
This is an android who very nearly successfully made another android. So I think he could give himself a paunch if he really wanted
if he
to.
really wanted
Maybe.
to throw that on there,
Yeah.
Maybe.
get his like little saggy ears, maybe some
That's
ear
right.
hair.
Now, do we think we're gonna see B4 activated?
I think we will.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
definitely. Definitely. You're not gonna have him there.
Just
and not
laid
gonna
out.
Use him. What are you doing?
know.
Come on.
Because what ship are they on? They're on they're like on a ship together, and
Yeah, they're on a ship
they're
later,
like,
and
the
I get-
Alison Pill like bring them along. You know what I mean?
I get the impression, and this is a wild
She, like-
guess based on what the ads I've seen, but I get the impression that like 7 of 9 is a bit of a rebel, and she's got like she's part of like a Maquis style
Yes.
group of people.
Yes.
Because if synthetic life forms were outlawed, people like Hugh and 7 would be very like people would be scared shitless
Because they're
by these
basically
Borg
like biracial. Like they're like
Yeah, they're biracial essentially.
they're like
Yeah.
right. So I don't know. I feel like, but what Alison Bill's character like stole him from the Daystrom Institute. She just like packed him up in a
You got a
in an
Wookiee,
Android
just
suitcase.
Throw it on the backpack of a Wookiee, and you're all set. I feel like we're looking at a show that is going to be offering us a lot of nostalgia, because when we go into that safety deposit apartment,
Right.
that Picard is
best.
allowed to have.
Whoa.
What a great space! I mean,
Great, eh?
my first question is,
It was a gold
why does
mine.
he have 2 stargazers that he keeps the gold one in one office and he keeps the like actual painted one?
He loves
But
his old
okay,
ship.
you like
Loves his
the
old
old
ship.
busted
What are you
ship,
gonna
I guess.
do?
But I love
I like that it started with the captain's yacht from the Sovereign Enterprise, which was
Right.
nice. And then, did you find it peculiar, Poyce, that an organization that has outlawed synthetic life forms is A-okay with holographic life forms, and how would the Doctor from Voyager feel about this?
Interesting. Does a holographic life form count as a synthetic life form?
It seems pretty synthetic. It's got a computer chip for a brain.
I don't know. I think they'd be less threatened by that.
It's interesting that you bring up the Doctor from like Voyager, because if that's the case, then his emitter? What's it?
His
Mobile
emitter. That would be like he's a synthetic life form, right? Because that allows him to go anywhere.
Yeah, he's Moriarty going for a stroll.
Yeah.
And that's dangerous.
That's
Sorry,
tricky.
Moriarty is very dangerous.
He's very dangerous. He's more dangerous than Data,
Yeah, apparently.
I wonder.
right?
The threat level between a holographic life form versus an android.
Is it easier to
Probably
take
android.
them out?
I'd be more worried about the android with his like 10 times human strength and ripping my limbs off.
Yeah, but then if
like
you're
a
like, if you're a hologram, you're like essentially part of the system,
Yeah, and you
which
have
could be
whatever
more
strength.
dangerous. Like you could disappear and be still doing
Yeah,
things.
and you have whatever strength is necessary because you're a hard hologram.
Good point.
You're able to lift whatever you need to lift, whereas Data has a theoretical maximum at which point his arm
Right.
falls off.
Mm-hmm. Good point.
Anyway, an interesting conversation, and I wonder if when
point.
Seven shows up, she will have anything to say about the Doctor. Because
Right.
they were pals, and Seven is around,
I'm
and Robert Picardo is not on the cast list.
I'm really hoping they address that somewhat, because like we haven't forgotten that the Doctor exists.
No, and they put a hologram in this episode
Right.
Yeah.
as like a perfectly fine index card.
Good
Yeah.
point.
So I thought that was fascinating.
Is that humor?
It's not like
Right?
I would have kind of loved it if he had to go through cards.
Right? The
Maybe,
Dewey
like-
Decimal System is the only way to find... Well, the Butlerian jihad happens. You wind up throwing shit back.
Not that far back with it.
There was one point we actually didn't touch on, which is this is the first new piece of Star Trek since 2002.
It's the first time we've moved forward.
First time we've
in the
moved
timeline.
forward
Yeah.
in terms of this is the future present,
Yeah.
which means that anything can happen. Whereas everything we've seen before had to sort of fit within. Oh, how many years do we have until they take over the Kirk
Yeah.
is the
Right.
Enterprise? Oh,
Well,
how many years before this?
And from an aesthetic standpoint, I'm interested to hear what you guys think about this blend of JJ verse and classic Star Trek. Because there was a point where you were looking out on the fields of France and you could see those JJ Abrams style mega city structures off in the background. Those only existed after JJ Abrams put them into his first Star Trek film. What did you guys think about the aesthetic choices in this? Did it feel like a step forward from the next generation, or did it feel like a marriage of JJ Trek, Discovery / JJ Trek?
I think it seems like a natural progression of where we are today, even outside of JJ and all this sort of stuff. It just makes sense, especially when they had the, what was it, New Boston or Greater Boston, or whatever it was
Yes.
called. You know, I'm like, yeah, that seems 400, 500 years in the future. Yeah, that makes sense.
Did you spot that Ferengi logo? It looked like there was a bank, a Ferenginar
Oh.
bank
I
that was in
didn't.
Greater Boston.
You're
It's pretty
kidding.
cool. Yeah.
You know when the captain arrived, like at Starfleet, and it was like these transporter, like walk-through
Yeah, those were neat.
Those were kind of cool,
You just
right?
like Stargate your way somewhere.
Yeah. I think it's kind of a marriage of like JJ stuff and like previous team. I think it kind of is, and I'm okay with that as long as it's not Calvin-y.
Yeah.
Like as long as the Kelvin doesn't kind of like creep into like the canon, then
Yeah.
But wouldn't you say in the movies, I mean, even with the original series, like maybe in the beginning of 6, I think we saw a little bit of stuff, and then I forget which one it was before that, but we sort of felt that there was, architecturally, it was sort of moving in that direction, right? And that was like 100 and something years before where we are now, so I was like, that makes sense.
Well, I guess a question I have for you then is, with the fact that Star Trek movies, and certainly JJ's Star Trek movies, are action movies, not philosophical
Right.
meditations in the way that Star Trek television tends to be. And he took it in that Star Wars direction to make it just action, 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 fight, fight, fight. And it was a pretty good audition for Star Wars, it turned out, because he got 2 of them.
He did.
Do you feel like the action sequences in this show fit in the Star Trek universe?
It's funny that you say that, because I actually watched the first, right before we started this, I watched the first action sequence in her apartment, in Roger's apartment, and I was like, that's not really like Star Trek fighting.
No.
You know, it's not like the way Star Trek, like,
It should be like karate chop.
this thing, this thing, over the back.
Yeah.
Unless you're Cisco and you just throw wild punches.
Hey, and that
he's
works.
so powerful. For some reason. I guess emissary power.
Yeah.
He's like
I've never
dipping
seen
into
anybody-
It's his biracial power.
so
Who does that?
I did notice that. Like it did. I mean, I guess I'm a Trekkie. Like it clicked.
I was like, my Buffy the Vampire Slayer fandom kicked in, and I was like, oh, good job, Buffy. And then it went right back to being Star Trek.
Right.
What did you think about seeing that kind of action?
I mean, it's sort of modern action, and it felt like you'd see in I don't know, Mission Impossible, or you'd see in something, and I could live with it. I mean, the fight scenes are not really what I live for in Star Trek anyway.
Oh.
I could definitely live with it, but I actually thought that the fighting in Discovery is a more modern interpretation of Star Trek fighting.
I agree.
In Discovery.
The Discovery
yeah,
fights,
like obviously it's updated from like just this whole thing, but like it seemed more like Star Trek
That's
to me.
interesting.
Like the fighting in Discovery seems more like Star Trek.
At the very least, I didn't find it disconnecting me from the show on Discovery.
Yeah.
I did find it disconnecting
I
me from
noticed
the show on
it.
Picard. Yeah,
like
it was
I
very
really noticed
noticeable.
it, and I don't know if maybe it's because she's an android and there's like.
I mean, we've seen Data fight. It's like this.
Yeah, but I
Yeah.
mean, she hasn't like he's Starfleet. Like he's. Maybe,
Maybe it's the
So
Starfleet.
maybe it's like a
It's
Starfleet-
military fighting training.
Yeah.
You
Is
just
that what it
learn
is?
to fight like this.
maybe.
They should revise that.
And then you
Hey,
do
man,
like,
if it- if
and
it's
then
very
you do,
instructive.
and you do big
Impressive.
roundhouse kicks like Riker.
Yes, Riker's roundhouse kicks. Well, when you got legs that go on for days, put those puppies
Then
to
you
use.
just like jump over coffee tables. And,
Yeah, you got to get those games in the shot, Will.
I wanted to bring up one other thing. Children of Mars. Did you guys watch the short track?
Yes.
I tried to. I couldn't find
It
it.
felt deeply unnecessary now that I've seen this
Right.
episode.
But I understand it is important.
It's probably.
right?
I mean,
you know what?
absolutely everything is covered
It's
Yeah.
in this episode. But
well, yeah, because it's problematic if you don't watch it before Picard, because then you're like, what's the point of watching it? Kind of, because it just basically it's another story of 2 kids, and then it basically just tells you everything that you find out in the interview with
yeah,
Picard.
they each have a parent who works at the Utopia Planitia shipyards.
Yeah.
So
So
I guess
then they're like, they
It's
watch
about,
it,
what, 8 minutes, 10 minutes, something like that?
something like that.
around that. Yeah. I mean, it's beautiful.
It's
and
it's beautiful.
Unnecessary.
But I was kind of like, why? Because you're going to tell us all that information anyway.
Right.
And the thing that I found confusing was that it shows that there was this little moment in the Children of Mars when you see Picard, and it's like Admiral Picard reacts, and he's 80 years old in the picture.
Yeah.
And then you see in this that was 10 years ago. If anything, Children of Mars confused me because the timing was not correct. It should have been a picture of Picard from like, I don't know, Insurrection, so that it was around, or Nemesis, so that he'd be like younger.
But also that Admiral Picard reacts was kind of like that language is very much of our time right now.
Yeah.
So that basically nothing's changed.
And to be fair, absolutely nothing's changed about how humans terribly write interviewers for television in the future, because that interviewer is not like, it's exactly how we do interviews now when they're bad on TV.
Yeah, exactly. Like she was totally like, oh, Fox News, and then
She just ambushed him.
Yep.
and then also like the language that Dodge and her boyfriend use, like he says amazing. It's
cool.
Okay, because amazing like is a word that's
Gnarly.
I don't even use in my life now because it like lacks all meaning.
But maybe
like,
from his planet, maybe on his planet they just came up with amazing.
And then she says, dude.
Yeah.
Dude, I got into the Days
She
from
did.
Institute.
Yeah.
Those things together Daystrom Institute and Dude are hilarious.
Yeah,
like in one
live
sentence,
together.
I was like, brilliant.
Now,
No,
let's
not
talk
really.
briefly about this idea that Daj may be a positronic clone of Data.
Yeah.
And, I mean, let's set aside the fact that positronic nets aren't real. And everyone who, over the last 30 years, has been like, they've gotten used to this Isaac Asimov idea from 50, 60 years ago.
Yes.
And in Star Trek, for 30 years, that they're a thing. This idea of a single positron in this net having, I don't know, quantum memory, and then that they are then quantum entangled, and you would make
buy it.
two. It does seem a little weird.
I just don't buy
like
it.
it feels a bit like a time crystal. Like you're using quantum entanglement. I see what you're doing. That's not how it works.
Yeah.
Did you feel like you were being force-fed technobabble the way Star Trek does it, or in some like other way?
I was able to look past it. I don't know. I just kind of let it wash.
Because I like a Heisenberg compensator. I enjoy a Heisenberg compensator as much as the next science.
I
geek.
can't tell you how much I just let it wash over me. Like, it was actually, like, criminal. How I just, like, no, seriously, how I was just like, yeah, okay, I
Whatever,
get that.
just give it to me. Yeah.
Yeah.
It could be that we've anticipated this for so long that maybe we're being really forgiving about this thing. We
Maybe.
just love it all. But maybe like a year from now we'd be like, I don't know.
Yeah, no,
Well, on
I
the
feel like
topic
it
of-
could happen, like, next episode.
Yeah.
Really.
But on the topic of anticipation, before you even watched the episode, you sent me a prediction.
No, I was about, like, 10, 20 minutes, maybe 10, 15 minutes.
But
into the
before it
episode.
happened,
Before
you
it
sent me
happened.
this prediction that Daj is Data's daughter.
Yeah.
Which, I gotta be honest, I considered, and then I was like, nah, man, they
Yeah,
did that on
that-
TNG.
yeah,
LOL exists, there's no way.
But
they're
I would have
gonna-
loved
When I looked at
if
her-
it was Data's daughter
No.
from TNG.
If it was somehow LOL. brought
Somehow
back.
it was her brought
I
back.
was-
Or like Maddox found LOL
That's
and
right.
got her to
That would have
function.
been, for me, that would have been like, that would have connected. I'd be like, oh, yes.
My
that
husband
makes-
was very irritated with me because he hates watching television with me sometimes because I'm a prediction machine. And so I was just like, oh, when I saw her smooth face and then she did the fighting thing, and then I was like, and then she had that Picard, like, basically a transmission that says, go to him.
Yeah.
I was like, that's Data's daughter.
It's funny because I was still at that point thinking maybe this is like a Borg Queen's daughter and is somehow being sent to Locutus. Like there were other things
for some
happening in my
reason,
head because
I
I
don't know.
did
Is
not
it-
allow
is it
myself to
great-
think LOL.
Is it great writing and
That could be
direction
cool.
that I connected the dream to her, like the Data dream to
Yeah,
her? Is
yeah.
that maybe his dream is like a premonition of her arrival? You know what I mean? Like,
I
Like, to
wonder.
me- 'cause
I
to
kind of got the
me-
impression he'd been having these for so long.
yeah, but to me, I was like, he just had that dream, and then this happens, and then she has like a certain look, and I was just like, that could
That's
be
Data's kid.
Data's kid. And then I wrote it on a
Interesting.
piece of paper,
Could be.
and I sent it to Matt. I was like, this is my
You know, there was
prediction.
something in that little flash vision that she had of Picard. And maybe I was reading too much into it. I was like trying to connect all the dots to TNG. And I was like, are those 4 lights behind Picard?
There were 4 lights
Yeah.
Were there?
behind Picard.
Yeah.
Yes.
I was like, is that could that
There was
be?
like
I
a
hope.
million Easter eggs. We're like
Yeah.
this episode was like drowning in Easter eggs,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
If you're like a TNG fan in particular.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just felt like I'm gonna throw. You know what? I'm gonna throw them that like the writing Siobhan and like Culpepper. I'm gonna be like good connection because I was able to put those things together. I'm gonna say they did it completely on purpose. You know.
Well, I think much like the way this episode quickly whipped Romulans at us at the end, let's talk about the Romulans in the next little while we have. Do we think Daj's quantum twin has pointy ears under that hair? Because we saw Daj's ears there; she got round ears. So
Right.
I'm curious: is she a Romulan to them? What do you think? Gut reaction.
Okay, so I'm gonna say no.
What do you think?
I'd
Gut
say
reaction.
no as well.
Interesting. Now, I'm looking forward to seeing where it goes because I'm hoping she does.
Yeah,
So,
I mean,
we'll see.
but-
What do we think about the fact that Romulans in their reclamation site have found themselves someone with a similar color scheme, the bad green guys.
Yeah.
Borg ship as their home world.
Well, that was bizarre. No, I'm still trying to. I was trying
I
to wrap
had
my
to
head
wrap
around it.
Yeah. Very like it kind of stressed me out.
It dovetailed for me in an interesting way because of the like apocryphal again storyline of Nero's mining ship being affected by Borg technology. That Romulan Borg thing keeps coming together in different storylines off screen. The first places destroyed by the Borg were Romulan neutral zone. Like the Romulans and the Borg have this interesting overlap. What did you think as it was happening, and as you could feel the image from the opening sequence of the Borg ship happening on screen at the end? How'd you feel? Did it give you the questions that make you want to go to the next episodes? Did it feel like forward momentum?
Yeah, I think so. I felt like I need an answer. I need answers. You know, I need to go to that next
And
place.
you're invested, you know, and maybe it's because we know these characters already. I don't know. But would we, if we didn't know Picard, would we be invested into watching the next episode?
Because I'm invested in absolutely none of the other characters so far. I don't mind his Romulan butler, who looks vaguely like a bald, older Will, and I don't mind his maid, who looks vaguely like a Romulan. Deanna Troi, and as he walks around with two people who are like, he's just living that nostalgia life.
Yeah.
But I found that whether it was Daj, didn't really care much for her. I didn't care at all for like Romulan Dreamboat Beardo at the end either. Like none of these characters other than Picard.
I guess I didn't either.
I did only when Daj did it. I was like, that's pretty epic.
You know what? That's
choice.
only when,
I was not expecting that.
That's only when. That's only when I was like, oh shit.
Because I was like, wait, no, she's gonna recover from this. Right? Oh, it keeps going.
She's
explosion.
She gone.
Oh, she's gone.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I wasn't expecting
I was like, that's pretty committed.
And then
I felt bad, especially since.
Felt bad because I didn't
especially
care
since
before.
I was in my mind for like a good amount of time there. I was like, that's Data's daughter. You know what I mean? I was holding on to that really hard. You know what I mean? And then it happened. I was like, no, not another
But
one.
we should also touch on that. Sort of segues into the whole sort of the hooded badass woman on the run who goes to Patrick Stewart's Rogue and X-23, and it always seems to be this badass woman on the run.
Whether he's Xavier or Picard, they come to him.
A father figure thing. What's that? What do you? If you can talk a little bit about your thoughts on that. Like, does he ask for that,
it's just such a good.
Why does that keep happening?
It's a good trope. I
Yeah,
mean, when
it's a
you've
good-
got
I was
an
just about to say
older,
that.
when
Yeah.
you've got an older character who is filled with wisdom and not so much action sequences, it's great to have that in a younger character. I think you mentioned it felt a lot like Serenity, the pilot.
Serenity again.
The pilot of Firefly, where you're like, oh, this confused, doesn't know her past, like killing machine woman has just popped up, and what do we do with her?
Yeah.
It's a trope. It's a common trope.
It keeps recurring. I don't know why that is.
I
don't know why that is.
I think, I mean, it did leave me excited though, the show, because it makes me think. I love that Generations. That whole like the adventure like in Picard. Take it the odds are against us.
Yeah.
Situation's grim.
Yes.
And I was kind of like, it has some of that energy, and that's kind of cool.
All right, well, let's talk about this energy and whether this energy was Star Trek energy. Vanya, did this episode Trek it or wreck it?
Okay. The only reason I say, I definitely trekked it for me. Definitely trekked it. It had a lot of philosophical, political things that I feel like are kind of necessary. But I also, when I first started watching, especially when he went into his safety deposit compartment, I was like, are you manipulating me? You know what I mean? So far, the captain's, Captain Picard Day and stuff like that. Because, sometimes I get frustrated when I'm being manipulated to feel through nostalgia, to feel like it's Star Trek.
Because
But
Captain
it doesn't.
Picard hated Captain Picard Day.
Yeah.
And yet he kept the banner.
But remember, he's all sensitive now.
Yes.
And maybe he was just like, as you get older.
Riker rolled it up and gave it to him
and
20
he was
years
just
later.
like, right? Exactly. And so you hold on to those. Like, he's a man who seems to want to grip onto his past, right? So as many of the like items, even in like physical form, he's trying to like hold on to.
Well,
his
he doesn't
past,
want
right?
the game to
end. He doesn't
end.
want the game to end. So I was concerned that maybe they were but I feel like it still has enough legs on its own without the nostalgia to be Star Trek.
I mean,
think.
they put him in
So, yes,
they put him in his uniform for one weird flashback. Otherwise, he's just like
That's right.
kicking it in a sweater.
Yeah.
So they're not giving us exactly what we're used to.
Yeah.
I think you're right. They didn't overdo it, where it's like, hey, you like this stuff? You remember
Here's
this?
some more of it.
Yeah, here you go. You know, okay, we saw the
I think it
saw
was-
the Enterprise D for a second and a little bit of thing, but it's really about this guy and where he is now.
Yeah, I think it was
let's get back
definitely
to
like
that.
subtle, and I thought the direction was good, and so then I felt connected to it beyond its nostalgia. So I will say yes, it tracked it.
Okay, Powys, did this Trek it or wreck
Trekked it. Well, I actually said trekked it before, but I can officially say it now. Trekked it for sure.
Yay.
Does it feel like Star Trek that we've known from that ended in 1994? Probably 60% so. But the 40% is like, well, it's because we're in 2020 and, you know, times have moved on and this character has grown and life has gotten more complicated in the universe. And so, yes, trekked it. Because it would actually kind of suck if it was exactly like season 8 of TNG.
Yeah.
If it was like, hey, let's just make another season of TNG.
If it was just the Orville,
You know?
it would be a little bit too earnest.
No, it'd be like, come on, what are
Yeah,
you
sure,
doing?
yeah.
You know? So it's like, okay, we've moved on. I can handle the changes. And I think it's in a safe place from
Okay.
what I've seen with the one episode.
All right.
Trekked it.
I agree. It tracked it. This, to me, deals with all the philosophy that's necessary. I could do without the teeny bop fight scenes, but the cinematic elements of this that make it look better than any Star Trek movie has ever looked.
Oh my God,
It
yeah.
is cool.
That's
I
true.
love the look of this show, and it feels like, you know, there's like holographic milkshakes and weird shit like that, but I'm pretty happy with the overall aesthetic moving forward the way it did. I think starting it in this vineyard where technology of growing a vine has only changed so much in 2,000 years. It's not going to move that much more in another 300 years. I think they did a really great job of giving us the used future vibe that you don't always get out of Star Trek. The fact that we spent 0 time on an actual starship, and yet this still felt like Star Trek is
right.
fascinating, and I am very excited for what's inside this mystery box.
That's right.
Can I say one thing about
Of course.
Culpepper said, the director? She said that she specifically wanted it to not look like Discovery, like as in like all the cool colors, like blues and purples and stuff. And she really wanted to have it have like warm colors and green and kind of bring out like the fact that he's a vintner, like, you know what I mean? And that's how he's been living for.
Oh, it
So
works.
it's definitely a director's choice as far as like the aesthetic feel. And I actually hope like her choice has like continues on for like the remainder of the show.
At least until they go into space.
Yeah,
at which
yeah.
point,
Yeah.
I guess it'll look however those
Yeah, but even
starships are
still
gonna
a
look.
little bit warmer, like where not everybody is like, you know, like the light isn't as harsh and stuff. I still think it would be kind of cool.
But you know what's weird, which is actually odd. I think when I was younger, I'd be like, "Yay, let's get into space! Go into space right away." I think now at this age, you know, both my age and Picard's age, I kind of want to stay on Earth a little bit longer. It's like, you know, let's see what's going on. Let's see more relationships.
And let's
What
see how
happened to-
beautiful
you know,
Paris looks. Like, it's not a post-apocalyptic hellscape. It's kind of nice to imagine that we somehow don't fuck up our planet.
That's right.
As you know, Australia's on fire, and
Yeah.
like we're in the middle of destroying planet Earth. It's kind of beautiful to have this idea that we do better.
Yeah, you always say that about Star Trek. And I think that most Trekkies think that, like, it's our dream, you know, of what we can be.
That's right. What we
Like
aspire to
our
do.
possibilities.
Yeah.
Right, and so yeah,
This is a
it's kind of
roadmap,
this
and I want to follow this roadmap.
Yeah, and it's kind of like it's great timing. Like Star Trek, comes out and it remains when we need it most, kind of thing. And that's it's a nice feeling to see.
I can live without
Us
space
still
battles.
standing.
I can live without space battles for. We've had enough space battles. I love space battles, but we've seen space battles.
I think we have some space battles coming. But...
I think they're on the way.
But I'm saying, like, let's
Romulans
see.
live on a Borg ship, so I mean, there's gonna be some pew
Romulan
pew.
Borg cube. We're like.
I'm saying,
That thing is getting
let's
into a
see.
fight.
I want to see more humanity because Picard in tone is really about like an older, more reflective sort of dude.
Absolutely.
And it's like I don't think I want to see him running down halls with like a shooting.
Yeah.
Well, we
people.
do know
we've
he
seen
will
his-
get tired.
Yeah, and we've seen his John McClane moments in the movies, and I'm happy with those. That'll do it.
Good.
All right, guys. Well, we are very excited to be doing this every week again and having like 30 odd opportunities this year alone to do some more of it. There's going to be some weeks where we're right on top of it, delivering this the week of. Some weeks where, travel happens, we're not all around. Mm-hmm. But we are looking forward to talking about every single episode and being with you every single time. So we'll see you on the next one.